viral YouTube video, a dead bear in a suburban driveway, a massive federal healthcare policy shift, and a deadly 1970s mountain mining disaster all had in common, you would probably think I was completely crazy.
I mean, yeah, on the surface, that sounds like a completely random list of things.
Right. But today, we are unpacking how every single one of those seemingly unrelated events triggers the exact same fundamental human response.
Which is this immediate panic over our safety nets.
Exactly. Panic over safety nets and this frantic, almost desperate demand for accountability.
And that's really the core of how communities operate, you know? When the systems we rely on, whether that's a local police force, federal funding, or just the physical boundary between a neighborhood and the wilderness when those systems are tested, you get this incredibly raw look at human nature.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are exploring the mechanics of how communities from quiet mountain towns to the entire national healthcare grid respond to moments of extreme vulnerability.
We have a really fascinating stack of sources to pull from today, too.
We do. We're looking at exclusive national reporting from NPR, local coverage from CBS Colorado, and some on-the-ground historical dispatches from the Vail Daily via vailychat.
So we're going to be tracing a line from a single animal all the way up to sweeping federal policy. We're looking at what happens when the protocols break down and people are basically forced to reevaluate who is actually protecting them.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting at the very top, at the absolute macro level of vulnerability.
The NTR report.
Right, the NPR report regarding the Department of Health and Human Services, or the HHS. And before we get into the weeds here, I want to be crystal clear for you listening. Our mission today is just to analyze the mechanics of this policy and what the sources are reporting.
Yeah, we are not taking any political sides on the cultural debate surrounding this issue.
Exactly, because that neutrality is crucial. The structural implications of this report are massive, entirely on their own.
They really are. So the NPR piece details how the Trump administration's HHS shelved a plan that would have cut off all Medicare and Medicaid funding to any hospital that provided gender-affirming care to minors.
And NPR described this as like the administration's most aggressive attempt to end this specific type of care nationally.
Right.
And the mechanism they were going to use to enforce this is what really caught my eye. They weren't just threatening fines.
No, they were threatening the entirety of a hospital's Medicare and Medicaid funding.
So let me push back on the mechanics of this for a second, because a lot of people might not understand the actual business side of healthcare. Hospitals are, massive multi-million-dollar corporations in a lot of cases.
Very true.
Surely they can just survive on private billing. Like if they lose Medicare, can't they just lean on Blue Cross Blue Shield and keep the lights on?
Yeah.
Why is pulling Medicare such a universally acknowledged death blow?
Well, to understand that, you have to look at what's called a hospital's payer mix.
Payer mix. Oh.
Yeah, so while private insurance might offer, higher reimbursement rates for specific procedures, Medicare and Medicaid provide the sheer, unrelenting volume of baseline revenue that a hospital requires just to exist.
Like keeping the doors open.
Exactly. We are talking about the daily operational cash flow necessary to keep emergency rooms open 24 hours a day, to staff the intensive care units, and to maintain incredibly expensive diagnostic equipment.
So it's not just a slice of the pie. It's like the pie is baked in.
That is a perfect analogy. And, for large urban centers, losing it would be a massive hit. But for rural or regional medical facilities, they operate on such razor-thin margins that Medicare and Medicaid often make up 56, sometimes 70% of their total revenue.
That's 70%.
Yeah, so if a federal agency uses that total funding as a lever to enforce a specific policy directive, it ceases to be a debate over just one department in a hospital.
It becomes an existential threat to the entire medical infrastructure of that region.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which explains the pivot. The administration essentially realized that, pulling the engine out of the cargo ship sinks the entire vessel.
Right, regardless of what direction they were trying to steer it in the first place.
Exactly. And that is the systemic vulnerability at play here. Abandoning this plan was a monumental shift in strategy because the collateral damage to the broader healthcare safety net would have been completely catastrophic.
Because if a rural hospital loses its federal funding, it doesn't just stop offering one specific treatment.
No, it closes its doors entirely to trauma patients, to heart attack victims, to everyone.
Wow. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the HHS story is really about federal agencies handling vulnerability on a massive macro scale.
But what we are seeing increasingly is how that exact same demand for protection and accountability is playing out on a hyper-local level.
Driven almost entirely by modern digital tools. Which brings us from Washington, D.C. all the way out to Eagle County, Colorado. And here's where it gets really interesting.
The vailychat report.
Yes. We have a report from vailychat on July 15th about a situation involving a YouTuber named Jason Gutterman.
Right. He runs a channel called Amagansett Press.
Right. And he's someone who specializes in, like, First Amendment audits and filming in public spaces, which already creates a certain level of local friction.
Oh, definitely.
So he returns to Vail on a Saturday and produces a video showing an alleged child abuse incident occurring right there in the middle of town.
And this video, it doesn't just circulate among the local PTA or a neighborhood Facebook group.
No. According to the Vail Daily Report, it completely explodes. It racks up over 500,000 views and generates 8,000 comments on YouTube in just a matter of days.
Which is wild.
It really is. And because of this viral explosion, the Vail police are suddenly forced to launch a public investigation.
And this completely upends the traditional model of community reporting. I mean, historically, a neighborhood watch is very localized. A resident sees something alarming, they call the local desk sergeant, and the police initiate a quiet investigation. The pacing is controlled, the context is generally understood by everyone involved, and the pressure on the department is, manageable.
Let me jump in there, though, because I look at those numbers, 500,000 views, 8,000 comments, and I wonder about the physical reality of that.
How so?
Well, how does a digital mob on a YouTube page actually force a physical police department to act? Like, aren't police supposed to be immune to internet comments?
I mean, in theory, sure, but in practice, absolutely not. The internet acts as this incredibly aggressive catalyst that creates what we could call asymmetric pressure.
Asymmetric pressure.
Yeah, so you have a relatively small municipal police force suddenly dealing with a global audience. Those 8,000 commenters aren't just leaving remarks on a YouTube video.
What are they doing?
They are actively seeking out the Vail Police Department's Facebook page. They're flooding their non-emergency dispatch lines. They're probably emailing the mayor.
Wait, so they're essentially DDoSing the town's physical infrastructure with outrage.
That is the perfect analogy, yes. They are DDoSing the police department. And for local law enforcement, that drastically compresses the timeline of justice.
Because normally, gathering evidence and interviewing witnesses takes time.
Right, it takes weeks sometimes. But when the phone lines are jammed with people from all over the world demanding an immediate arrest for something they just watched on their phones while on their lunch break,
the police are suddenly fighting a two-front war.
Exactly. They have to conduct a legitimate legal investigation while simultaneously managing a massive real-time public relations crisis.
It's like the spectators have replaced the actual witnesses.
And the spectators demand instant gratification. They want accountability immediately because they're basically consuming the trauma as content. It fundamentally alters how local law enforcement has to allocate their resources and prioritize their response.
That concept of a community demanding answers from authorities is incredibly potent.
Right.
I just saw it mobilized globally over a vulnerable child in a resort town.
But our next source shows a community rallying in a very different way.
Over a completely different kind of vulnerable resident. We are moving from the digital landscape of Vail down to a physical neighborhood in Douglas County.
Right, the incident in Castle Rock, which highlights a completely different friction point in our safety nets.
So, according to a CBS Colorado report, a mother bear was shot near the Terrain neighborhood in Castle Rock. And the response from the residents wasn't a collective shrug.
No, not at all.
The report describes the neighborhood as deeply agitated, confused, and fiercely demanding answers from authorities regarding why this lethal action was taken.
Which, on its face, might seem surprising depending on where you actually live.
Right, like if you're listening to this from an apartment in Chicago or in Manhattan, you might be rolling your eyes right now thinking, you moved to the Rocky Mountains, of course there are bears, why are you surprised?
Exactly.
But you have to understand the specific mindset of these expanding Colorado subdivisions. We have this concept of like living in the wild's living room. So help me bridge this gap. Why did this specific incident cause such profound and visceral agitation rather than just the standard resignation of, well, that's what happens in bear country?
What's really fascinating here is the psychology of the wildland-urban interface. When people purchase homes in places like the Terrain neighborhood, they are buying into a very specific aesthetic.
They want the illusion of pristine nature.
Right. They want to see deer grazing in the morning mist from their kitchen window. And they understand intellectually that wildlife management exists to keep their families safe.
But management is such a sterile, bureaucratic word. It sounds like paperwork.
It does. And the cognitive dissonance shatters the moment management materializes as a loud, violent intrusion into their quiet cul-de-sac.
Right.
When state wildlife officers have to actually discharge a firearm in a residential area, it completely breaks the illusion of peaceful coexistence.
And take that a step further. This wasn't just a bear, it was a mother bear.
Exactly. And that triggers a deeply ingrained biological empathy response in the residents.
They aren't seeing a dangerous predator. They are seeing a mother protecting her young, right in their own sanctuary.
And that forces the community to confront the brutal mechanical reality of how their sanctuary is actually maintained. They demand answers because they need to reconcile their empathy for the animal with the authorities' violent actions.
It raises a really important question for any growing community on the edge of the wilderness, doesn't it?
It does. It asks exactly what level of lethal intervention are you willing to accept in your own backyard to maintain your safety?
When the conceptual idea of safety requires violence, the community's tolerance for that system is severely tested.
Definitely. It's the realization that the safety net protecting your kids from the wild sometimes requires killing the wild.
And that is a really tough pill for a suburban neighborhood to swallow on a random Tuesday afternoon.
Especially when that friction between human settlement and harsh environments is practically the foundation of the state. This sudden shock, the tragedy, and the community's demand for answers, it isn't just a modern symptom of expanding suburbs or viral videos. It is deeply woven into the historical DNA of Colorado.
Which leads us perfectly into our final source. And honestly, this is one of the most striking stories in this whole stack. This comes from a Vail Daily piece highlighting the Vail Public Library's Vail Valley Voices collection.
The Oral History Project, which, by the way, is vital for preserving the actual context of these towns.
Oh, absolutely. So the interviews are conducted by Tony Morrow and David O. Williams, and we're looking at the 6th installment featuring a prominent local figure named Jack Eck.
Who is really a foundational character in the Vail Valley.
He is. Now imagine this timeline. Jack Eck is a veteran. He survives the trauma and the sheer horrors of the Vietnam War. He gets out, he's looking for peace, and he decides to move to the pristine, quiet mountains of Vail to start a new life.
Makes perfect sense.
Right. But during his very first week in town, he is thrust directly into the middle of the deadly Gilman Cave-In.
Which was a catastrophic mining disaster just down the road.
The juxtaposition of that is just staggering to me. You escape a war zone, you seek out a sanctuary, and immediately you are confronted with a deadly industrial disaster.
It's unbelievable.
What does an event like that, a cave-in that traps and kills members of the community, what does that do to a town's psyche?
It acts as an absolute crucible for the community. And this is exactly why preserving oral histories like Jack Eck's is so critical. Because today, when you or I think of Vail, the immediate association is luxury.
Oh, yeah. High-end ski resorts, heated gondolas, Michelin star restaurants.
Right. It is a curated vacation destination.
The edges have all been sanded down for the tourists.
Exactly. But Jack Eck's story pulls the curtain back on the rugged, unforgiving reality of what actually built that town. Gilman wasn't a ski resort. It was a hardscrabble extraction economy.
A mining cave-in meant your neighbors, your actual friends, were trapped beneath the earth.
And there was no state-level PR team coming in to manage the narrative. There was no viral video bringing outside help from across the globe.
It was literally just the people in that town grabbing shovels, having to dig each other out.
Yeah. And surviving something like that, especially for a man who had already survived combat in Vietnam, it forces a community to bond in a way that modern society rarely experiences anymore.
Their identity wasn't formed by luxury real estate.
No, it was forged by processing and surviving harsh, localized tragedies shoulder to shoulder. They had to rely entirely on a localized safety net of mutual support because, in those early days, no one else was coming to save them.
It's a completely different kind of resilience.
It is the bedrock the whole valley was built upon. When you listen to Eck recall that era, it just strips away the modern veneer and reminds us that community strength used to rely heavily on physical proximity and shared trauma.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive talking about safety nets and how communities react when the alarm bells ring. And just look at the massive spectrum we have covered today.
It really is a wide lens on the exact same human condition.
We looked at the federal government making sweeping threats to healthcare funding, only to back off when they realized the systemic damage it would cause to rural hospitals.
Right.
We explored 500,000 people on the internet, weaponizing their outrage to force local police to investigate a child abuse case in Vail. We saw a Colorado subdivision mourning a mother bear, forcing a neighborhood to grapple with the violent reality of wildlife management.
Yeah.
And finally, we look back at a Vietnam veteran, recalling how a 1970s mining town survived a deadly cave-in by relying purely on each other.
And the connective tissue through all of this, the thing that ties it all together, is the desperate human need to construct, defend, and sometimes rebuild those safety nets when we feel most vulnerable.
Exactly. Whether you are dealing with a shift in Medicare policy, a digital mob, or a neighbor down the street, understanding these reactions gives you a masterclass in the fabric of the communities you interact with every single day.
It really does. And I think it leaves us with a fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling paradox to consider.
Oh.
Well, think about the contrast between our first and last stories today. In the past, as Jack Eck described with the Gilman cave-in, a community's response to a crisis was deeply localized. It was shared grief, it was physical presence, it was digging out together.
Right.
But today, our response to a local crisis like the YouTube video in Vail is an instantaneous, global, viral explosion of outrage.
So the local neighborhood watch has basically been replaced by a global digital megaphone.
Exactly. So as our physical neighborhoods and our digital networks continue to merge inextricably, what does the future of community resilience actually look like? Are we slowly losing the capacity to heal together locally, face-to-face?
Or are we simply gaining a much larger, much louder, and far more demanding global neighborhood watch?
That is the question.
Yeah, completely changes the sound of the alarm. You think you're ringing a bell to get the attention of the people in your building,
Right.
but you're actually broadcasting your vulnerability to the entire world, and you have no idea who is going to show up to answer the call.
A really wild thing to think about.
It is. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you on the next one.